Hi, I'm Melody. Welcome to Tropical Problems, a video series serving up easy, practical, science-based tips to survive the build-up season and prevent mango madness. In each episode, I'll speak to an expert to find out how to manage the heat so we can live our best tropical lives. Hi everyone, today's episode is all about keeping yourself cool in the tropical buildup. So the buildup is that horrible sticky season between the end of the dry season and before the rains start, where there's this promise of rain, but it isn't quite there yet. It's humid, it's sticky, it's warm, and you just start to feel really cranky. So we're here today with Dr. Matt Brearley. He is a heat stress expert with a PhD in thermal physiology from Charles Darwin University. So welcome, Matt. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
Tell us, what are your top tips for keeping cool in the build-up?
Doing any physical activity in the build-up is a challenge, but we need to get outside, we need to be active, we need to do work. So the tips usually revolve around minimizing your heat production, so minimizing that physical work. So getting up early, starting your exercise early, beating the heat, I guess is what you'd call it, and minimizing your time outside when it's hot or hotter is a good idea. Our main tips are about cooling down. And so that might be utilizing rest breaks in air conditioning, which is pretty popular in the NT, and most people have access to aircon. Some people will pour a bottle of water over their head or put cold towels over their upper body, and whatever works is fine. But the science says those things are pretty ineffective. They make us feel a bit better for a short period of time, but not a long period of time. But one of my favorites is the slushy. So crushed ice drink, kids love it. They love it for a reason. It's because it keeps them cool. Adults don't tend to use a slushy so much. I think it's a stigma. I think it was cool when you're a kid, and so you must be immature if you have one. That's why I have lots, I guess. Still a 7-year-old in my brain. But it does drop your core temperature in a scientific manner. It does lower your core temperature through absorbing a lot of heat from your body, because that ice has to melt inside your stomach. That requires a lot of heat to do so. Slushies in hot, humid conditions are incredible for their ability to drop your core temperature while not having to remove yourself from the heat, not having to take your clothes off to hop into a pool, or not having to hop into aircon. So I'd say they're a great method. And our last one, which I just touched on, is hopping into a pool. Most Territorians have access to a pool. Temperatures of the pool, they don't need to be so cold. 28, 29 degrees is very common for the top end in the build-up. We just say the warmer the pool, the longer you need to be in there. So maybe 20 to 30 minutes for a 30-degree pool.
Does that mean, Matt, if you're trying to keep your core temperature cool, does it mean that laksas and lattes are off limits?
Depends. No, look, they're not. But you might need to do something to offset the heat that they might induce. So having a coffee or a laksa, that's something you want to do. It will potentially add to your heat stress. You just need to offset it. So I don't know whether you can have a cold iced coffee. It comes with the territory, right? Very popular.
Yeah, that's it. Well, apparently there's laksa ice creams, so people are game for that.
That's something I hadn't heard of, but that's an option. That'd have the cooling effect and the flavor. Why not?
What do I wear? Do I want to wear natural fabrics? Do I want to wear the moisture wicking stuff? What works best?
Let's start with this moisture wicking stuff, because it gets talked about a lot, right? Now, these fabrics have generally been tested in hot, dry conditions. And again, we get this difference between hot, wet and hot, dry. And so the wicking technology doesn't work in the hot, humid conditions. It simply does not have the ability to take that sweat away from the skin and evaporate it any better. This is just my opinion, any better than you having no clothes on or a cotton t-shirt on. I think you should wear fabrics that feel good. Everyone will have their own take on what that is, but generally is a very light fabric, allows air to flow through it, provides some protection from the sun. The fabrics that most people tend to talk about are very light in color as well, generally a cotton-based fabric and not tight fitting to the skin. So allowing some gap between the fabric and the skin, and allowing some air to flow.
What I have in mind is, as you're parking on one end of the city, walking to your office building, and you see people walking in front of you, and you've got these guys in their long sleeve office shirts, and they're absolutely saturated. Yeah, it just makes me think what actually does function best in the tropics, especially in the build-up. Do you want to be a little bit saturated and have that evaporate, or do you just want to let it all drip off you?
Being saturated for me is very, very common. I don't think it's good.
Yeah.
There's a thermoregulation to be saturated in the tropics. The reason you saturate is because that heat is generating sweat, and that sweat is not evaporating.
My last question for you, Matt, is drinking alcohol in the build-up a good idea?
It depends who's going to see this answer, because I don't want to be blocked at the border, not for COVID, but for having a view on alcohol that's not with the territory. Look, a scientific viewpoint on alcohol is that it is a diuretic, so it does dehydrate the body. And most people equate dehydration with heat stress. While dehydration does influence our heat management, they're not one and the same. From the scientific point of view, I should say, ingesting alcohol in small quantities doesn't make a large contribution to dehydration, and therefore doesn't make a large contribution to heat stress. When I say small quantities, 2 standard drinks is what I'm talking about here. So a study done by a great bunch of researchers based at University of Queensland and Griffith University tested Queensland beer, so 4X. Territorians probably think that's not beer, but it is what it is. It's full strength. It's about 660 mils. And they found that after physical activity in the heat, so athletes playing sport, recreational athletes, 2.2 standard drinks in the change room after that event didn't make much of a difference to their hydration status. If they went over 2.2 standard drinks, obviously then we're starting to see that diuretic effect. So from my point of view, small quantities of alcohol to help you get through the build-up may be okay. Large quantities, not so. And when I say large, there'd be some people that practice the 8 before 8, so 8 beers before 8 p.m. and you'll be right for work the next day. No, that's
Never heard that one before.
You haven't heard that? No. Any construction crew, go and have a conversation with a construction crew out in the heat. They'll knock off at 2:30, 3 o'clock. They will start very early. And if you yell 8 before 8, they'll give you a thumbs up, no problem at all. Up the quantity of alcohol, regardless of how much you drink, you're going to empty the body. So the floodgates open and it's all over. So what about scotch? What about bourbon, etc.? So, well, that might only be 50, 100 mils. And so you're more likely to be dehydrating yourself. So yeah, if you go a little bit harder, the harder spirits, you're going to have to add some more fluid in there, which is going to be a bottle of water to go with your alcohol.
So in short, choose fish bowls over shots.
Oh, very weak alcohol, yes.
All right. What else have you found works for you? I guess in your experience up here in the top end, what else works to manage the
Look, I think there's all the cooling and whatnot. We can look at cooling to lower your body temperature, lower your core temperature, and that's very scientific. But I found that for me, I'd really need to manage my mental state during the build-up. So it's not necessarily how hot I am. My core temperature can be quite low, but I can be quite agitated. I'm dealing with the heat that I had several hours ago. So I used to work at the Institute of Sport. I would run around and train with the athletes. I'd try and do all the training with the athletes. And then I'd ride out to the rural area. And by the time I got home in the build-up, I was pretty cooked. I was empty. I really didn't have the tolerance for my family, for food, for anything. I was just done. So I used to jump in the pool and just sit there or have a brief swim, and then I could have a slushy. After that, I could hop inside, have a shower and not sweat. You know that feeling where you have a shower, you hop out, you're still sweating. Our core temperatures are still too high, so they need to be lowered a bit more. So my advice to anyone who's exposed to heat is not just think about work, if that's where you're getting hot. Think about your whole after work setting and how can you cool down and be a good person at the same time and play with the kids and stuff. So I found that the pool was central to our life in the build-up. Just have a think about how you can manage your heat stress while involving the family, because some methods just take us away from family. Do stuff that's fun, and usually water-based activities are central to that.
Yeah. Well, that's really good to know. Thank you so much for your time, Matt. That's been excellent.
All good. Thanks, Melody.